Hi, I'm Mike, owner of the Ingram in Phoenix, Arizona. So a couple of weeks ago, Rhino dropped news that they were going to be reissuing reel-to-reel tapes. Not the consumer reel-to-reel tapes you would have found in the record store in the 60s and 70s or Columbia House mailed out in the early 80s, but we're talking 15-inch IPS Studio Master tape copies. Now, these have always been like a super niche item throughout the decades. And about 15 years ago, companies actually got licenses to start selling these things commercially, but they're not cheap. We're talking $450, $500. Here's an Analog Productions Ultra Tape. The Ultra Tape is $450, but the sound on these is absolutely phenomenal. We're talking mind-boggling good. Figure your best records you've ever heard, and then kind of put a multiplication factor in there because they're unbelievable, and it makes sense. Records were recorded to 15-inch, generally inches per second, reel-to-reel tape. This is the original format, the format of the master tape. So anything after that is going to be lesser quality. You know what I mean? Anytime you go from a reel-to-reel to a CD conversion or a reel-to-reel to an analog, even vinyl record, it's still a format conversion. So there's a loss in quality. So master tape copies are the pinnacle, but the problem is they're so expensive. $450. Bar entry is expensive. Tape decks, we're talking $10, $15, $20, $30,000. Big money for a good reel-to-reel tape player. So they're expensive. It's just not a cheap format to get into, and the software is limited. Software being the actual records to listen to. So $450 for a reel-to-reel. Super high price players, and then not a lot of options to choose from. So you can see how it's a not a recipe for a very popular format. But Rhino is kind of doing something new. Still expensive, but what they did is the Ultra Tape that I just showed you, that's on two separate reels. Let me bust that out for you. That is two separate reels, just how a Studio Master tape would have been recorded back in the day. You've actually got side A and side B presented on two separate reels, kind of like you see there, right? So what Rhino did is they put both sides on one reel-to-reel. So there's more tape per reel, but in order to do that, they actually had to go to a little bit thinner reel-to-reel tape. That's a 1 mil tape. That's a 1.5 mil tape. But you've got the whole album on one reel-to-reel. So they were able to lower the cost down considerably. So the things that kind of shocked me is A, Rhino is doing it. Blew my mind. But also the fact that they're $299. Now, $299 in 2025 money. You know, reel-to-reel was $500 15 years ago. $400, I think, was the original price of the tape project stuff 15 years ago. They were expensive. So this is a much more affordable option. Also, one of the drawbacks to reel-to-reel is you're typically just getting a lot of classical, a lot of jazz. You know, you're not getting mainstream titles. Analog Productions has started doing more mainstream titles lately. They did the White Stripes, although not a audiophile recording by any stretch, but they're doing the Bob Marley stuff. Sounds fantastic. They're doing some more mainstream titles, but for the most part, it's been a lot of, you know, a lot of fringe titles, where here we've got the Warner catalog to cull from. So that's kind of the introduction to what we've got here. We've got reel-to-reel. Must be somebody over there at Rhino that's into reel-to-reel, right? I mean, how does this happen? How does a major label say, you know what, we're going to do reel-to-reel. We're only going to make 500 of them. They're going to be $299 a piece. Somehow this is going to be profitable. I think somebody over there at Rhino is a reel-to-reel fan, but I'm here for it. Fantastic. So we've got these two albums. I got them immediately. I'm not a big fan of either of these albums, right? Electric Warrior, yes. I mean, Electric Warrior, I prefer this album over the Yes record. I'm not a huge Yes fan. I'm not a huge T-Rex fan. It's got Bang a Gong, big hit on this. This has got I've Seen All Good People. But these kind of reminded me of the old days. In the old days of audiophile records, 20 years ago, you didn't get releases like you have now. Now, 20 releases, audiophile, analog, cut from master tape a week. I mean, that's commonplace. Back in the day, not so much. You waited a couple months. You bought pretty much everything that came out because you wanted something new. You wanted a new toy to play on your system. So I kind of had the same philosophy with these. I mean, like, if there was infinite amounts of reels to choose from, these probably wouldn't have been choices for me. But when I heard this, I'm like, I have to jump on board. Like, I got to do this. I'm a big reel-to-reel fan. It's the ultimate format, but it's the most unpractical format. Do you know what I mean? Although at this configuration, I could see if they get enough titles in the hopper. They always talk about how reel-to-reel is not an expandable format. The people that are into it are into it. People aren't going to get into it. You put enough titles like this out at $299. Machines are more plentiful now. There's companies make Revox makes a machine now, still 16 grand, but they are making machines. There's companies making machines. There is a strong possibility that you can pull people into the hobby. I truly believe that that's a possibility with a company like Rhino putting big mainstream titles in print. Okay, so let's get back to these two titles. I'm not a huge fan of these, but they're also not very good sounding records. I don't think anybody ever put on this T-Rex record and said, you know what? Boy, that's a demo quality record if I've ever heard it. Now, I've got two titles that I'm not a big fan, but I've got a white label promo, American copy of T-Rex. I've got a white label promo of the Yes album. I don't have much else because I don't need 20 copies of these two records. I'm not a huge fan. But with reel-to-reel, it's so easy to do a little shootout. Loaded up the reel-to-reel, put the record, cued the record, hit play simultaneously. We're off to the races. I've got two synced up sources, and I'm able to just go back and forth. So it's so easy to do a review. Not only that, my reel-to-reel deck has the ability to adjust the output, so I'm able to volume match. Super easy. I'll start with the Yes album. And I had a couple people in because it's an event. You get reel-to-reel. You're like, come on, listen, check out the reel-to-reel. You know, this is event listening when you spin reel-to-reel. So I got the Yes album out. The consensus was, hands down, better sounding than the vinyl. We're not talking mind-boggling good. When you listen to some of these reel-to-reels, a lot of the companies that have done them so far, they've chosen titles that are just unbelievably good on reel-to-reel, and nothing even comes remotely close. That wasn't the case with this album. Although I think it was better in every way. Now, I'm only comparing it against the US Atlantic. Maybe a UK Plum would sound better. I'm not 100% sure. I don't have it. But in this case, every bit of the reel-to-reel was better on the Yes album. Better soundstage. Always with reel-to-reel, you get much better bass. Top end was beautiful. I mean, this was just... There's no reason I would ever spin vinyl if I wanted to listen to this album. This was just all around better. The thing is, not only was it all around better, but you don't get the surface noise. You don't get the tracking issues with the tail end of a record. You know, when you play the end of the record, you're going to get more inner groove distortion. Trackability becomes more difficult. This is so linear. It sounds fantastic. I still think it's an interesting choice because it's not an audiophile record or even close to an audiophile record. It's a good sounding record, but it's not the creme de la creme. There's so many great jazz titles, I think, that would lend to this format. Although we want rock, there's been enough jazz. But R&B, there's so many great R&B titles. R&B has been so neglected when it comes to audiophile records in general. Or, you know, a lot of those great 70s R&B records were recorded so exceptionally well, and then they've never really been reissued, or if they have, they've been budget reissues. They haven't really gotten the proper audiophile treatment. So there's so many things that would benefit from this format. I don't know if this Yes album was the perfect choice to lead it off, but they let it off. They let it off with these two titles. But the thing is, there's kind of a catch-22 here. They've confirmed one more title is in the future, but if these don't sell well, maybe they don't do future titles, which would just really be disappointing to me. I'd be bummed. I'm really looking. I would love a Doris title. I would love a reel-to-reel format continuation here. Like I said, it's the ultimate format. I'm thinking in the store here in the near future to get a reel-to-reel tape deck there and then maybe do some listening sessions to kind of get, because most people, they're watching this video, they're like, I've never heard this. I have no idea what you're talking about. Rich person format. Nobody can afford this, but I think it'd be cool to bring this into the store and have you guys be able to give a listen to some of these reel-to-reels. But I think Rhino is in a situation here to where they can make this a viable format. RM is doing the tape duplication now. So they're sending essentially one-of-one tape copies. So take the master tape, you make a copy of it. That copy then is sent to RM, and they're using that to make what you see here. So it's third generation, but you don't have the generational loss when you go from reel to reel to reel to reel to reel to reel like you do when you start format swapping. You know, if you go to reel, you make a safety, and then you make a copy of the safety, essentially cut to lacquer. Then you make a father, a mother, a stamper, and then the record. You've got a lot of generational loss there. But from reel to reel to reel to reel to reel to reel, there's less so. So I'm looking forward to it. I think 500 copies. I'm hoping these things sell out. I'm hoping this is like, hey, we should do more reel to reel. Reel to reel is awesome. And they're just in a hot hurry to put out a bunch of reel to reel. Don't know if it'll happen, but that would be my ideal situation. But again, yes, slightly better, but not mind-boggling. It's not a record that I would show people like, hey, you want to hear the power of reel to reel? Listen to this. That Yes record wouldn't be one that I would show them. Now, the thing is with both of these are flat transfers, whereas a lot of other reel to reel, like I don't think the analog production stuff, I don't think the tape project stuff, these aren't flat transfers. I think these have been mastered. I'd have to look into it a little more, but I think there's a little bit of mastering involved there, and then they're put to reel. These are flat transfers. These are copies, essentially, of the master tapes, unmastered. So there's a little bit of working and tweaking that could be done to improve these. But I'd be curious of your guys' comments. If there's anybody watching this that actually owns these, or you're reel-to-reel fans, what do you prefer? Like, I'm thinking I almost prefer the flat transfers, and then in the future, if I want to get an equalizer, if I want to kind of play mastering engineer for a day, I can go into my living room, spool up these reel-to-reels, and I can kind of tweak things a little bit. Now, the Yes, I don't know if that would necessarily be required, but let's go to Electric Warrior. Electric Warrior, noticeable differences between this and even my US original. Now, a lot of people tell me that the UK of this on Fly is the way to go. But comparing the two of these, you could tell this is a record that went through the mastering chain. This, you could tell there's some things missing. And by missing, I don't mean missing. I mean, there's some tweaks that were made to the record that are not here. Partially the upper end frequencies. This doesn't have a lot of high-end frequencies on it compared to the vinyl. The vinyl, they clearly boosted the treble. Doing that kind of gave the guitar a little bit more presence, a little more grit, a little more guitar sound, because it really emphasizes that mid-range. Hi-hats, trebles, a little bit more sizzling on top than this. But this has a better soundstage. Everything is clearer, but not as embellished. You know what I mean? This is really where they've took this, ran it through the mastering columns, and like, well, let's add like a 2-3 dB at top end, these frequencies here. Let's goose this up a little. I mean, that's what they did with the vinyl. But it came from this, so you're not necessarily hearing things on this that weren't on the tape. It's just they've been tweaked, they've been embellished on vinyl, which is often the case with a mastered record. This is a record, though I like the idea of a flat transfer. This probably could have benefited from a little mastering. This needed a little bit of tweaking, I think. But truth be told, this wasn't the record I think that this format needed. I don't think we needed Electric Warrior on reel-to-reel. Unless they plan on doing everything on reel-to-reel, then no problem, let's do it. But if you're only gonna release a select few items on reel-to-reel and you're like 50-50 on the format, do we do this, do we not do this? At least give us like the best of the best. Let's give us the goods. You know, let's push it forward. Like, I would have loved to hear, can you imagine moving in stereo coming off of a reel-to-reel tape? Oh, I would have loved to hear that. There's tapes that I would have loved to hear. I don't think anybody's been clamoring for Electric Warrior on reel-to-reel. I could be wrong. I'm, the world's biggest Electric Warrior fan, T-Rex fan out there could be watching this video saying, my dream. I mean, every record is typically somebody's favorite. Might be their mother's favorite, but typically every record is somebody's favorite. So there's a good chance somebody was super thrilled about this. But this was, the bottom end is nice. The soundstage is nice. This is kind of a wonky listen to, though, to be honest. It's a wonky listen. Wasn't the best representation of the format, but it's hard to say, well, it's not worth it, because It's a copy of the frickin' master tape. So how could it not be good? And it is, but it needed a little futzing. So not my, if I was over there running the show at Rhino, I would have listened to this if I was a tape guy and said, you know, maybe we'll put that out a little bit in the future. Let's not lead with that. Let's put something else out. You know, if you look at some of the Rhino hi-fi titles they've done, I think there was some better choices in there. Some of those ZZ Tops would have been good. The Cars would have been good. Some of the titles they did for the Rhino Reserve would have been good. God, I'd love to hear the new Curtis that's coming up for Record Store Day. The Rhino Reserve, I would have loved to hear that as a reel-to-reel. But we're at the beginning, I hope, ground level of these reel-to-reel tapes. And I hope there's great things on the horizon. Doors. That's my hope. There's great things on the horizon. We need to get some reel-to-reel out there. It's just fantastic. And this, I know I'm going to get roasted in the comments, but this is a reasonable entry level for people. $299 for a reel-to-reel tape. It sounds expensive, but we're at the $150 for UHQR phase right now. Reel-to-reel is capable of so much more than a vinyl biscuit. It's the ultimate format. So there's got to be 500 people out there that would gobble these up. I can't see that not being the case. I hope these sell out. I hope we see more. I hope they can make money on this. I hope the numbers get ratcheted up. I have no idea. This whole thing, the last couple weeks, thinking about this has just been somewhat perplexing. How did this get done? Who put this? Who greenlit this? I love it. But who greenlit this? Like I said, somebody over there at Rhino is a reel-to-reel fan. Rhino does put out a lot of killer stuff. The Rhino Hi-Fi, the Rhino Reserves. They've been on an absolute tear with the quality of it. They really are looking after audiophiles. Hands down, they're putting out some killer stuff. This reel-to-reel for me just really seals the deal that they're putting out some top-flight stuff. Hopefully we get some more titles in the future. A lot of great stuff is possible, but I don't know. I don't even know who the hell I'm making this video for. Who's watching reel-to-reel reviews on YouTube? Most of you guys are watching this video. If you even made it this far, and you're like, what the F is this guy talking about? Nobody can afford this shit. This is unobtainium. This is ridiculous. I get it, but if you've got it, you know. If you've listened to it, you know. This is a cool series. This is true hi-fi. This is true Rhino hi-fi. The best of the best. So hopefully better titles and something that I personally like a little more. I'm looking forward to future releases. All right, guys, check us out online at theingroove.com. Until next time.